Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, so today we are going to be going over Nginx. Nginx is a very awesome, very popular, very powerful web server. It's a Linux server. It's actually one of the most popular web server that's out there right now. It's past Apache, which has been used forever. Yeah, Nginx is kind of the champion right now for everything. It's pretty sweet. So we're going to learn how to set this up on our servers and how to serve web pages. So important things to note is that Nginx is a web server, but it is also a reverse proxy. Think of a proxy kind of like a gatekeeper. It's where the traffic comes in. It's the single point of contact. It's where you can set up your SSL cert, for some web acceleration and make things faster, where he's the one who does the certification. But he's kind of the gatekeeper, and he picks and chooses who gets the requests, right? So your server sits in front, or your proxy server sits in front of your REST servers, and what he's going to do is pass those requests on. The web server's going to do its thing, ask whatever data source it needs. That's going to come back to the proxy server, and he's going to send the request back down to the client. So that's kind of how that works. You usually have a single point of contact on that proxy server, and then infinitely many REST servers behind him, and he can serve up, however he wants. Load, round robin, kind of whatever you want there. So that's what Nginx is. Nginx is pretty awesome. It's default in the Ubuntu repositories, so it's available with Ubuntu. We just need to make sure he's updated, and we should be good to go. So, kind of the first steps that we need to do is install Nginx. We're going to go over that. Then we're going to go over managing the Nginx processes and some of the basic commands there. We're then going to go over configuring the server blocks and setting those up. And then the next thing that we'll do, let me find the next section here, sorry. We are going to go over the directories where everything kind of lives for Nginx. And anything beyond that will be out of the scope for this video, and we'll go over it in another one. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is we need to SSH into our server. Okay, now that I'm in here on my server, we need to just make sure that the packages are updated so we have the latest version of Nginx. Okay, so we need to get our packages updated, and then we'll install Nginx. So let's do a sudo apt update. This is going to install all of our packages, or make sure that they're updated, rather, sorry. The next thing that we need to do is we need to install Nginx, if I type it right. All right, he's going to install Nginx for us. Okay, Nginx is pretty nice as it self-registers as a service. All right, we can do these guys. Let's just say yes, okay. All right. Okay, he self-registers as a service, making the installation and adjustment super simple as he's already registered. So what we need to do is we need to manipulate the firewall so we have access. All right. So to see our app list, we just tell UFWO we want to see the app list. We're going to see three options for Nginx. We have full, which is port 80 and port 443. So it'll allow regular web traffic, and it will allow secure web traffic. You have just regular HTTP, which will allow just regular web traffic, non-secured web traffic, and then you have HTTPS, which is only port 443. So it depends on what you want to do. If you're going to configure a certificate, if you're going to just have regular web traffic, whatever you're going to do, right? We can just do that. So the next thing that we need to do is pick which one we're going to do. In this case, we want to just do our regular HTTP, so we're not going to set up a certificate. So we're going to say sudo ufw allow sorry, just paste that guy in there. All right, so we can see that our rules were added. So we see a sudo ufw status, and we're going to see Nginx HTTP is in there. We also have port 80 and port 443 independently from our server configuration and setup before. But if we just run it through Nginx, we don't necessarily have to add those independently. So you can deny them. You can do whatever you want to do there. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is we need to make sure that Nginx is actually up and running now that we have the firewall access and we have it installed. So we just want to see the status. So we're going to ask the system control for the status of Nginx. We can see here that he's active. He should be up and running. And then kind of where we see some of those Nginx logs, that'll tell you how long he was up and running, when he was started, all of that stuff, and kind of what's going on with this guy here. One nice thing, this is great that we see that he's up and going, but one thing that we do want to do is just sanity check that this is up. So we're going to type in our server IP. We're going to go in there and we see the default Nginx welcome page. So we know that Nginx is serving pages. So congratulations, we set up a web server that does serve a site. So if you really wanted to, you could just go in and you could edit this HTML file, inject whatever you're going to do, and you wouldn't really have to configure anything. However, it doesn't have a domain or anything like that. So, you need to set up that stuff too. But Nginx is working, which is awesome. So let's go back into here. All right, we verified that our server is up and running, both through the system control and going to our server IP and verifying that the site is up. All right, and that's it. That sets up a web server. The next things that we're going to do is configuring Nginx. We are going to go through some of the management process, and then we'll set up the server blocks, which is how you determine what sites are served where. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to go over some of the process management for Nginx and how we can start, stop, kind of do all of that, all of the general management that may or may not need to take place on the web server. So a few of these basic commands, super straightforward. So we have stopping our web server. So we can copy that guy, paste him in, sudo system control stop Nginx. Now if we do a status, we can see that he's inactive, he's dead, he's off. Right? And if we actually go to our page, we can see this guy here. We're going to reload the page. He's just going to hang and then die because we don't have a web server up and going. Right? So if we go back in here, we can turn him back on. All right, and to do that, it's just same command, sudo system control start Nginx. We again can verify the status. We see he's active, alive, and happy on there. Now let's double check the site. Boom, Nginx is back. All right, so there's a couple of other things that we can do. We can do a restart of Nginx, and what the restart does, it's add a true stop and restart. So exactly what we did, it just does them in succession. So if it's in a weird state, you update something, you just need to reload it real quick. There you go. So he should be started again, active. He's up and going 8 seconds ago. You can see from where we just made that command. And then there is another one here. This one is meant specifically if you do config updates. You don't need to do a true stop and restart. If you're just editing config, something like that, where you just need it to reload. And this is a very soft restart. It doesn't truly kill the server. It just reloads all of the config files for your server. And again, sanity check, status, he should be good to go. We can double check our server, refresh, he's happy, and he's good to go. And those are really the basic commands that you need to know. There's a couple more if you do want to, disable auto start of Nginx. If your server reboots, I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. That is just a sudo system control disable. All right, and that is going to stop our server if he or it won't restart the server. It won't turn Nginx on by default if the server reboots. So we want to switch that guy to enable to turn that feature back on. So if our server stops and starts again, Nginx will automatically start in that process. And that's, like I said, I wouldn't recommend that one, but it is available if you have a use case for that. And those are really the basic commands that we have for Nginx. Super straightforward. We just, talk to system control, tell it exactly what you want to do. Start, stop, reload, restart, whatever you're going to do there. Okay. Some of the next steps here is setting up these server blocks. And this is the important part. This is what truly gives you your website. There is a right way and a wrong way to do this. We're going to do it the right way. And I'll explain the wrong way. We don't necessarily need to go down the rabbit hole of showing you, but there definitely is 2 ways to do this. But this is simply the block of code that tells where to route requests, what to do if a request comes in from a specific URL that we'll set up in a DNS, to do certain things. So what we want to do is set these guys up. All right. So the default for Nginx, where files live, where your actual site files live, those are in our, let's see, we can just do an ls, do var HTML. This is our default site. This is this site. Okay, so if we cat that guy, we just want to see it. No, set directory cat our file there, so you can see this is welcome to Nginx, right? The styling, welcome to Nginx. This is the page you see. Right? This is exactly what this page is. So this is where it's serving, is from that file, that var www, Nginx Debian, blah, blah, blah. That is the site that's being served. That is the default. So instead of modifying this guy, what we want to do is set up our own site. This is where the distinction comes in. With setting things up, we set them up in their own directory structure, and then we also set up our own server blocks relative to whatever site we're going to do when we get into the sites enabled, sites available stuff. Okay. So we want to set up a default directory for what we're going to do. All right, so we need to make a new directory. It's sudo make dir. We're going to pass in p for parent. And what this will do is if the parent doesn't exist, it will create it for us, but it should. So in this case, we're just going to call it Tanner Barney HTML. Follow that same schema. So we just made a directory. It created all the children because Tanner Barney directory didn't exist, so it created that one and the HTML directory. All right, we need to change the ownership of this guy. So we're going to change the ownership. We are going to say change it to our user here, the user and user group that we have for our logged in user, which in this case is dev, and we're going to tell that to do it in the directory that we just created and HTML. So now that user group will be changed. And verify that by let's just navigate there. HTML, we do a long list. We can see our permissions are changed here. That it's now dev for that group. All right, that's just granting permissions, right, that we've gone over in previous videos. All right, or granting ownership. Now we need to grant the permissions. So we're going to say change mod r. We're going to do 755, so I can do whatever, and the groups can do their thing. To var www.Tanner Barney. So we change that parent directory. So this guy back here. So I can do those things. Let's see. All right, now we need to make our super awesome site that we're going to host on Tanner Barney here. So let's make a page. I'm going to say nano HTML, and we're going to just call this guy index HTML. So let's paste in our super awesome site. All right, save this guy. So we have our site. That's going to be the file that's served, similar to what we saw with Nginx here. But this will just be for our domain that we're going to set up. So this isn't going to work yet, right? We just put in an index file or an HTML file. It's not going to do anything fancy yet until we set up our server blocks. So that's kind of what we need to do now. So I will show you the server block process. So where these live is these live in our etc directory. We go into Nginx. All right, you look at this guy, you're going to see quite a few things that come default with Nginx on the install. the ones that really matter are our sites enabled and our sites available. All right, now what the distinction is here is we have sites available, so these are potentially available server blocks that we could host, and then the sites enabled are the sites that are actually being served in Nginx, and that's kind of how it looks at it. We put the default file, the server block file, in sites available, and then we symbolically link those to the sites enabled. Right? And that's the process that we're going to kind of go through right here. All right, so we need to make our first config that we're going to do here. If we do see sites available, you're going to see that there is a default. If we cat the default, you're going to see the default server block that we have here. So this is saying listen for port 80. We have the default traffic. We're going to serve that file that we were looking at before. It's going to look for index.html, the Nginx Debian. This is the file that is actually being served. You know, and just again, those kind of boilerplate server files that we have. That's what it's setting up. So the wrong way to do this is just to modify this file. So we would go in here, we would set up another server block right below this guy to listen to, you know, a different domain name, you know, and it's definitely not what we want to do. It makes it management significantly worse. So what we want to do is set up a new structure here. Okay. All right. Let's see. So we want to make a new file. So we can say nano. We're in sites available. So we're going to say Tanner Barney. So that's the domain that we have that we're going to set up. So I have the file here. All right. We're going to just copy this block that I have pre-prepared. Instead of your domain, we need to set this guy up for Tanner Barney, because that is the root path that we're looking for. So if you recall, we set it up in the var www.tannerbarney.html. In this case, we are looking for the index.html. It can look for any of these other ones. We can just leave them there. In this case, let's see, we have, so we can route to kind of whatever we want to set up. In this case, we're going to say, you know, tannerbarney.com or www.tannerbarney.com. Okay. And that's all we should need. So we're going to do that. Here's the location. It's in this default one. We're going to look for these files inside of that directory. This is the server domain name that is going to be looked for on that route. Okay, so we set that guy. We saw important thing is the default root path. All right, and now we just need to enable this site. So we have the site set up in sites available. All right, so we have the default, the Nginx site, and then we're going to set up the other one, our Tanner Barney site, that we created the index file for. So sites available. All we need to do now is we need to set up a symbolic link between the two. So we're going to do a soft link. Say let's see Nginx sites available, Tanner Barney. All right, and then that's going to map to Nginx sites enabled. Okay. And that should work. Now if we step back and we go into sites enabled and we do a list of that, so we can see the default is symbolically linked to our sites available with the default file being served to the default server block. And we also have Tanner Barney symbolically linked to our sites available Tanner Barney that we just created. Okay, so that's setting up the relationship, and now Nginx knows to look for Tanner Barney if that request happens to come through, if those directives are sent. Okay, so we will listen now, like I said, for either tannerbarney.com or www.tannerbarney.com, and those will be the default server on port 80 because we did not set up a certificate. Okay, there's a few things that we can do as well here. So you could set up, for example, port forwarding, and what that's going to do is forward upstream to a PM2 process. So if we have, you know, an app that's being loaded on port 3000, or we want the REST server on 3001, or whatever it's going to be, we can use Nginx to serve those requests up to a specific port. To kind of show you that, let me just go back into here. We'll just go back into our sites available real quick. We'll go back into hold on. we're going to go into, sorry, sites available. Tanner Barney. So if we go into this guy, we would set up like what they call upstream. All right, and then we're going to give this a what they call a backend name. So we would say REST for the REST server, and then in this case, let's close that block, and we would say server, and then we want to give it the IP. So this is where you could route it to another server, or it could be on this local server. So if we wanted the REST server on 3001, we would say 3001. We would give him a keep alive command of 8. There's a whole bunch of different keep alive command, or sorry, not just keep alive commands, but a bunch of different types of commands. So you could set max connections. You can set the fail timeout. So if it takes too long, in this case, keep alive. It's just a key value. What it means is the maximum number of idle connections that we could have to our upstream server. So the amount of connections that can happen at a time. And it's not necessarily what connections can happen at a time, but which ones are cached in our system. So obviously when a page is loaded, those requests happen. It caches up to, in this case, 8 of those connections, and then the oldest connection it flushes and replaces it with anything that's new if it doesn't happen to be one of those cache connections. So that's what the keep alive is. And that's how that piping a process, or in this case, we have Tanner Barney, piping that up to a certain port. All right, and then let's see if we wanted to do some sort of redirect. So in this case, if I wanted to, let's say redirect to a from port port 80 to port 443. So in this case, we have this guy here, which is doing this guy. Let's, what we have working. Let's just, for argument's sake, do this. So it's a, listen, port 80, default server, and then we would also say return a 301, and we're going to pipe this guy to, whatever that URL would be. So in this case, tannerbarney.com. And then give him our location try for our failures, if they do happen. Let's see, and then this guy would be basically our same location try block here that we would have there. But this would basically redirect all traffic that we have coming in on port 80 to this URL and return a 301 response to the 380, meaning a redirect response. So that's kind of how those two pieces work. As I don't have a certificate set up and I don't have PM2 set up on here, obviously we're not going to keep going on those, but that is how you would set up those blocks as well. All right. Just again, for some context, if you want more details on what those configurations options are going into Nginx, you can go into their Nginx docs and look for Nginx docs, and they're going to kind of walk you through how to set everything up, what those mean, what your key values mean. So if you wanted to set up your upstream stuff, you can go to that, what your keep alive process is, and there you go. There's their documentation on what to do, what the values mean, and they just have a ridiculous amount of these. So that's kind of what you'll want to look at for those. Let's see. So now, kind of the next thing that we need to do is we need to ensure that we avoid what's called hash bucket memory problems. And what this is going to do is just updating the config to provide more memory to the server, so we don't have a hashing issue that can potentially take place. So we need to go into our etc Nginx, and then we want to go into the Nginx configuration file. This is the default configuration file for all of Nginx. So we go into this guy, all right, and then we need to find the section that says server names hash bucket. So it's this guy right here. We want to uncomment him, all right, and then what that's going to do is basically determine our bucket size that we want for these guys for our hash to have. So let's save that guy and exit. We want to test our Nginx config file because we made Nginx config changes. We want to test those. So we're going to test that guy. All right. There is a duplication error. Our test failed. Awesome. We have a duplicate default server on port 80. Since we have port 80 already running. So we just want to turn that guy off. So let's remove default. Sudo remove default. All right, run our test again. And he's successful. Now that we removed that duplicate that we could have. Now it shouldn't necessarily be an issue because they are routing to different things, but because the Nginx one is the default, it is truly the default. It doesn't actually have a URL associated with it. We could get some weirdness that could happen there. So removing that default page and just serving the sites that we want is probably best practice to go forward with there. So there's no problems there. So again, because we made configuration changes, we want to restart our Nginx or reload our Nginx. In this case, let's just restart him, give a hard stop, a refresh. He should be good to go. All right. Now we have the default changed. We have for sites enabled. We just have Tanner Barney piped here, so he's being served. We do again have our sites available. Sorry, that does have our default site and our new site that we just set up for Tanner Barney. I do have a DNS or the domain for Tanner Barney with the DNS pointed to my server here. So if I open up a web page and I just look for http://tannerbarney.com, all right, boom, there it is. Red Sky University server block is working. So we do have our site up. It is working, and that's it. So if we want to, get up to deploy to this site, we just change our configuration to point to that directory or whatever we're going to do. It's going to do the lookup there and serve whatever we need to, and that's that. That's how it all works. So pretty slick, pretty easy. A lot, and demystifying some of that stuff. Just a little bit of helpful information that we want here. So let's just kind of go back through a few of the important things. So where the actual content lives, and this is because of how we have things set up. You can change these paths, but you just have to remember to change it in your root directory for the server block as well. So in our case, we set up everything in our var www directory, right? So that's where HTML and Tanner Barney site live. If we go into the Tanner Barney site, we have our HTML. Let's go into our HTML. We have our index file. If we cat that guy, cat our index, that is the site that we saw over here, up and running, right? So that's where it's being served from. That's where we would have our Git set up. That's where we would deploy our code to, is to that directory structure. That exists because of our sites available. So if I look at Tanner Barney sites available, it is right there, our root path, pointing to that file that we have. These are the domains that are accepted. These are also available just in my DNS, tannerbarney.com. So I have Tanner Barney and www.tannerbarney going to my server. So those are set up to route there, and that's why I get that to load. Some of the other things important to know in the etc directory is where Nginx lives, and that is where we are now. But if we look at that guy, here's our Nginx directory. So we have, this is the default root directory for all of the config files, all of that stuff that we need to have. The main config file is what we were in before. That is our Nginx comp file. So this guy right here, that is our main config file for Nginx. So if you need to change any of the main settings for Nginx, it's going to be in there. All right, so just look at that guy and you can set up how your logging works and how everything works, the different types of certificates that you can have, what order that they will try to resolve in, where the general logs live, where everything lives, and this is again where that all lives. All right. The next thing important, obviously, is kind of where we spend the time setting up those server blocks. So that is our sites available. This is where the actual server blocks live. Remember, it is important to do distinct blocks, server blocks per site that you're going to serve. In this case, we could serve multiple sites and just set up those paths. But this is this is the right way to do it, as opposed to just having one big default server file that has all of them mixed in there, and it becomes a pain. We've done it before. Highly recommend avoiding that. Just keep in mind the sites available is not where where Nginx looks to serve from, right? That is our sites enabled. This is where the code is actually served from. It's set up as a symbolic link to the actual sites available files. There's a couple other things that you can look at. So you'll notice snippets here. These are usually meant for repeatable configurations that you want to put in. So if you have some custom configuration that you want to stuff in there, you could use the snippets if you want to go down that path. Just come into the docs and look for snippets and set those up that way. All right. The logs, obviously, logs are very helpful. Logs are nice. They kind of help everything. So in our case, the default for logs should be in our var directory. We have log. We have Nginx. All right, and this is where our logs are going to live. So we have the access logs. So this is going to log every single request we have to our web server on record. So if we cat our access logs, sudo, it's weird, I shouldn't get a permission to we can cat that guy, so we see every request that has been made to our web server, a successful request that's been made to our web server. Same thing goes for our error log. We can see every error that's been sent to our server. We can see that test that took place where we got that duplication for port 80 that was coming. Anyway, so that is it. That is Nginx, guys. It's awesome. Spend some time playing with it. It'll serve multiple sites. It's really powerful. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, all right. Thanks.